5 Live Formula One.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez in Mexico City, where the air is thin, the fans in the Forosol are loud, and the rookies are ready to shine. We've got 9 new drivers in action over the course of the next hour. Some back for another bite at the cherry, others getting their first taste of Formula One machinery. We'll talk you through who all the newbies are going up against the usual crop. In the commentary box to do that, alongside myself, Harry Benjamin, is BBC F1 correspondent Andrew Benson, and journalist and co-host of Inside the Piranha Club podcast, Rebecca Clancy. Good evening to the two of you. Beck, you love a bit of Mexico, don't you?
I adore Mexico City, yes, one of my favourites. Just so fun, so vibrant. The food is absolutely amazing. I could happily eat tacos every day for the rest of my life. It's a really interesting challenge for the drivers and the teams, obviously, being at altitude. It's just got everything going for it. I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, and it's a decent track as well. You've got that long run down to turn 1 where we could see some action at the start of the Grand Prix. Just over 1.2 kilometres. There you go, from the start finish line all the way down to that braking zone before you're then flicked into the right-hander, then a quick left-right, which leads you down another short straight, another left, then right, then a almost quite tight right-hander leads you into the fast and flowing middle sector, and then in that final sector as well, coming through that amazing stadium, the Forosol, the baseball stadium with a max capacity of 25,000 people during Sunday's Grand Prix. The atmosphere is electric there. And Andrew, there is quite a bit to talk about as well, because we've got a title fight on our hands between not 1, not 2, but 3 drivers.
We have, and it's squeaky bum time, isn't it, Harry? So yes, Max Verstappen has had an extraordinary run of races since the Dutch Grand Prix, when he finished second to Oscar Piastri. McLaren haven't beaten him since that race, neither driver, and he's closed up from 104 points behind to 40 points behind Piastri in just 4 races. So if he carries on doing that, then he will be world champion for a 5th time at the end of the year, and it's McLaren's job now to stop him doing that.
Let's give you some numbers to go with that in terms of standings. Oscar Piastri currently heads the championship with 346 points. He's 14 ahead of Lando Norris. Max Verstappen sits 3rd, 40 points back from Piastri. George Russell, whilst mathematically still in title contention, does sit a little further adrift in 4th, with Charles Leclerc rounding out the top 5. And in the Constructors' Championship, McLaren sealed the deal in Singapore. They are the Constructors' Champions for 2025. Mercedes, though, are sitting pretty in 2nd. They're only 7 points ahead of Ferrari, who are only 3 points ahead of Red Bull. So that could get quite tight as well. One thing to bear in mind, Beck, that could be interesting, we spoke about it quite in depth on the Checkered Flag podcast previewing this weekend, which you can always go and listen to on BBC Sounds in between Free Practice 1 and Free Practice 2 if you're looking to kill some time, about the Red Bull turnaround and all the elements that have led to that. They brought a new floor in Monza, the changing of team principles, and Max Verstappen himself playing a part. But notice that they've also brought a new floor for this weekend, which is quite outstanding when you think everybody else on the grid has pretty much stopped development.
Yeah, it's quite amazing, isn't it, really? Because as we go into next year, it's a full regulation change. That's engine and chassis. It's a big year. A lot of teams have had to make a very difficult decision as to when they change from developing this year's car to looking at next year's car. Obviously, we have a budget cap in place, so they can't just throw money at next season's car. It all gets wrapped into each other. So I wouldn't have expected teams to be bringing such big upgrades at this late stage. Only 5 races to go, 2 sprints, but they have, and I think it shows you how seriously they are taking this Drivers' Championship fight. McLaren have told us that they've already switched to 26. They aren't bringing any more upgrades. The car that they finish the season with will be this one that they're driving this weekend, drove last weekend in Austin. They can make a few tweaks, obviously, but we won't see anything major happening. So yeah, I think with Red Bull still bringing upgrades, improving that car, it's probably on a par with McLaren now, and with what looks like a reinvigorated Max Verstappen, who is so up for this. it's just going to be a brilliant run into the season finale in Abu Dhabi.
Max Verstappen that is up for this is a dangerous Max Verstappen for the others in the field, as you can hear the sounds of engines firing up and heading towards the end of the pit lane, ready for the green light. Sun is shining over this Mexico City circuit. Grandstand slowly filling up as well. Air temperature just creeping above 23 degrees centigrade. Track temperature 48.2 degrees centigrade. And we have the green light on at the end of the pit lane. Free practice 1 is up and underway, and heading straight out onto the track will be one of the Mercedes drivers, and it will not be the usual one. In place of George Russell is Frederik Vesti, the Danish driver who races in sports cars but also acts as the Mercedes reserve driver. Finished runner-up in the Formula 2 Championship a couple of years ago, gets an outing in that Mercedes. George Russell stepping out for this one. We'll see all the regular drivers back for FP2. I'll tell you what, should we just list all the FP1 drivers now so you know who's what? You've got a bit of... Actually, this is the first weekend where we won't have a Mexican driver on the grid for Sunday's Grand Prix. We'll get one back again. Sergio Perez will return next year. But for now, the fans will just have to shout for Pato O'Ward, who is in place of Lando Norris, the IndyCar runner-up from this year, who races for the McLaren IndyCar team, as is at the wheel. Over at Ferrari, long-term sim driver Antonio Fuoco, the Italian, is in for Lewis Hamilton. Fuoco actually won Le Mans last year for Ferrari. At Red Bull, keep an eye out for Arvid Lindblad. We will keep an eye out for him as well. We expect this 18-year-old Brit to possibly have a seat on the grid next year with Red Bull's junior team. He's currently racing in F2. Mentioned Fred Vesti at Mercedes. At Aston Martin, Jack Crawford, the American, makes his free practice debut. He's also racing in Formula 2. Alpine sees the return of Paul Aron, the Estonian, still in a fight with that Alpine seat that Franco Colapinto currently holds. Haas have got the Japanese driver Ryo Hirakawa back at the wheel. Racing Bulls sees the Japanese driver Ayumu Iwasa in again. And down at Williams, Luke Browning, the British F2 driver, currently third in the standings, is in for Carlos Sainz. So busy session for those FP1 rookies. I know, Beck, I mean, I quite like the fact that we get to see some rookie actions. I like the fact that it's a forced rule in Formula 1. They have to run a rookie in at least 2 practice sessions from this season onwards. Before it was only 1. I think it's a great opportunity.
It is a great opportunity. I do agree with doing it. I'm not sure about doing it this weekend. We have a 3-way fight for the championship on our hands. Going out in the first outing is Piastri. That's it. Oscar Piastri is the only one in the title fight who's gone out in FP1. So Norris and Verstappen aren't getting the data or being able to set up the car how they want. They're going to, they're missing a practice session, an hour of track effectively. So if it was me, and actually Benny and I, we were talking about this yesterday, and as you so well plugged, Harry, you can hear it more on the preview that we did. If I'm Lando Norris, okay, in Austria, I think it was, he missed out on FP1 and it was Alex Dunn and he stood in and it was brilliant and he loved it and it was great. Pato O'Ward, second year he stood in here in Mexico. But if I'm Lando Norris, I want as much track time as I can possibly get my hands on, and possibly the Mexican has paid for this hour in the car. But if you're Lando Norris, you're probably going to say, look, here's a check. I'm going to make it back when I win the Drivers' Championship, if I win the Drivers' Championship. So could I have my car back, please? I could do with the time on track.
Well, the thing is, these decisions are made some time ago, and the reason they choose Mexico, the reason there are so many 9 reserve drivers or backup drivers in the cars, is because this session is a bit like those daytime sessions at places like Bahrain and Abu Dhabi. It's about as unrepresentative as a first practice session can get. This track is very, very lightly used through the year, so it's very dusty, and lap times can be as much as 4 seconds slower. And in fact, I heard George Russell saying yesterday that quite often he sometimes thought he would rather not be in P1 here, because you don't get sort of a confusing reference for your car. Obviously, I take that on board, but and so it does make logical sense. You have to do this, as you were saying, Beck, from the rules. But be that as it may, it might be a track with less grip, but it's still the track you're going to be racing on this weekend, and it's still an incredibly important race weekend for people like Norris and Verstappen, of course. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if they could reverse time and make that decision again. They might think, well, maybe we should have done it at a different race, but they've still got to pick one then, though, haven't they? And of course there's 25 points for all 24 races of the year, so you're going to have to do it at some point. So that's the thinking behind it.
I suppose the other choice would have been Abu Dhabi, right? But because you got the sprint in Brazil, Vegas is a street circuit, and Qatar's another sprint as well, so it's tricky to pinpoint them. Hashtag BBC F1 if you want to send any queries or comments, or you can email us f1@bbc.co.uk. Andy's got in touch on these rookies that are in the field. How many of them will we see possibly make the step up to F1 in the next 2 years? Just Arvid Lindblad at Racing Bulls is where he is heavily expected to be in the fight, but Beck, any other takers that you think might make the step up out of the current crop, or indeed out of the ones we've seen throughout this year? You mentioned Alex Dunn earlier as well.
Yeah, so he's parted ways obviously with McLaren now, having done that outing, as I said, in Austria. Not a reflection on his performance. That was actually because he's got nowhere to go within the McLaren stable. It's a pretty common thing to do. We know that Piastri and Norris are signed long term to McLaren, so there was no seat for Alex Dunn, a very talented Irish driver. He has been linked to a Racing Bull seat. At the moment we've got a lot of drivers, haven't we, trying to squeeze into those 4 seats. So the only person who is confirmed at the moment is Verstappen in the Red Bull. Tsunoda, quite frankly, just hasn't been good enough. Red Bull in their preview strangely decided to point out that he'd scored more points in the last 3 races, 15 points, than he had in the entire rest of the season, which was 12 points, which I thought was a slightly strange thing for them to point out, but thanks very much. And then obviously in the Racing Bulls we have Isaac Hadjar and Liam Lawson. And then we have, like you say, Lindblad, who is fighting for that seat. Alex Dunn's name has also been thrown into contention. So I think we're going to have a couple of very disappointed drivers next season.
So I think I know what's happening more or less with the Red Bull and Racing Bull seats. Pretty sure Isaac Hadjar's going to get the seat alongside Max Verstappen. And I'm pretty sure that Lindblad, who's driving the Red Bull, Max Verstappen's Red Bull in this session that we're watching at the moment, by the way, Esteban Ocon's just beaten Charles Leclerc, just to underline how pointless it is at the moment. Lindblad,
give him a chance, Benny.
Everyone's tuning out now.
Lindblad will get one of the Racing Bull seats, and the other Racing Bull seat is between Tsunoda and Lawson. Now, it's almost like it doesn't matter, because neither of those two are going to get promoted by Red Bull into the main Red Bull team again. So they're almost like holding a place, and that place they're probably holding for Alex Dunn if he finalises his deal with Red Bull, having got dropped by McLaren, having the two of the parties couldn't reach an agreement on his future, I think is the politest way of putting it. That he is talking to Red Bull. I think the chances are he'll race in F2 again next year with the same team he's racing for at the moment, which is Rodin, and he'll be kind of like the Red Bull reserve-ish, and he'll be on hand to maybe move up into Racing Bulls either at some point next year if he looks good enough, or possibly in 2027.
For reference, in the F2 standings, because we have a lot of the drivers out on track, Alex Dunn is currently 5th and Lindblad is 7th. So it'll be interesting to see how the season finishes. Not many races to go, but Red Bull will be looking at that. I
want to come back to you on this chat, but let me just do a bit of admin first. 51 minutes and 30, 29, 28, 27 seconds remain. Isaac Hadjar tops the session at 1:21.0, 4 tenths ahead of Oscar Piastri. Tsunoda is third. Ocon, Leclerc the top 5, with Albon, Vesti, Hulkenberg, O'Ward and Lindblad the top 10. Only man who hasn't set a lap time yet is Fernando Alonso, but he is on track at the moment, making his way through the forest oil, so he'll have a lap time on the board shortly. Now, interesting, so Racing Bulls next year could end up with an all-rookie lineup if an Alex Dunn move is finalised. Is that what you're saying?
Not at the beginning of the year.
Okay,
maybe
fine.
At some point later on if Dunn impresses in Formula 2, assuming he does a Red Bull deal, which is, as far as I know, is not done yet.
But at least one rookie, you think, at Racing Bulls in the form of Lindblad.
Yeah.
So I would argue and make the case that would you not be better off, at least in the short term, to keep Tsunoda and Lawson at the Racing Bulls team, Do you want a bit
Why?
of, for next year, it's a brand new car, brand new slate, you want a driver that's experienced and can try and
We're going
help.
to have one of them.
But surely you want two.
Why?
To get the team back up to speed and to have confidence, to
Who
have...
says they need to get back up to speed?
Well, no, but with a brand new car and a brand new reset, surely I think, why would you put a rookie in at the deep end like that? You'd surely want
The team
to
exists.
understand the new 2026 rules first.
To find drivers for Red Bull Racing, right? That's
hasn't
what
for
it's
a while.
What it's, but no, but that's might not have succeeded in doing it, but that's what it's for. And to be fair, Alex Albon and Pierre Gasly and Tsunoda have all come from that team. Now, they may all have proven in Red Bull's minds that they didn't deserve to keep the seat at Red Bull, but they did graduate. And so if they've already made their mind up, I mean, they dropped Lawson after 2 races this year, Harry, and Lawson has Tsunoda has very much not impressed since he got into that car. Whenever it was, I've forgotten now. Oh, after
Japan.
2 races, yeah. He just hasn't, and so I don't think there's any doubt in Helmut Marko's mind, and it's his decision ultimately in concert with Oliver Mintzlaff, the sort of head of the Red Bull F1 program in Austria now. There's no doubt in their minds that those two drivers are not part of the long-term future of Red Bull Racing, the lead team. So why keep them hanging around, both of them, for any longer than they need to?
So which one are you picking?
That's a really interesting question. I don't know. And you'd have to do it if you were Red Bull based on criteria that I don't have enough insight into to know why they would make the decision. I.e., are they good at setup? Are they good at engineering? Who has more potential? Potentially, who's better to work with?
Who would you personally pick?
Yeah, you were team principal of McLaren on the preview.
I said I wasn't team principal of McLaren.
I feel like you could have been at one point. So now you're at Racing Bulls. You're Alan Permain.
You're quite close to Alan Permain, aren't you?
Get in the mindset of Alan Permain. What's he doing?
Well, it won't be Alan's
Well, it will be
decision,
Helmut Marko ultimately.
I think Lawson, maybe.
Interesting, because I actually think that Lawson really struggled in the Red Bull, but there'll always be the caveat of he only did 2 races. We're never going to get the full picture. But Tsunoda was closer than Lawson to Verstappen, so in my view he's got that box ticked. I also wonder, I know Honda are splitting from Red Bull and they're going to go and become the Aston Martin Works team, but if Honda want to keep their man on the grid, do they offer a little bit of money, a little bit of dollar to help keep him in that junior team at Racing Bulls and just keep him fresh for maybe a chance down the line with Aston Martin?
I mean, there's chatter, isn't there, about him going to Aston Martin next year and being a reserve driver on the off chance that one day maybe someone might realise that Lance Stroll probably isn't the best option for that team. And I hate to say it while I'm sat next to Benny, but Fernando Alonso will retire one day. So they do need options. So yeah, he's been quite closely linked to that for obvious reasons, as you say, Harry, about Honda. I don't think sitting out one season is the end of the world if you're quite closely working with that team. Yes, big regulation changes coming next season, but he could do a couple of FP1 sessions or whatever they need from him. Also, let's be honest, this sport is pretty ruthless. You know, you're talking already about how maybe someone gets a shot for half a race and then Alex Dunn could come in. You sign up for a season, you sign up for 2 seasons. Contracts don't mean anything in this sport, so you can get parachuted in at any time.
Well, it's going to be, I believe, didn't they say they were going to make their minds up after this weekend, Red Bull, on the future? I mean, who knows really, but I thought Mexico was sort of a marker.
It was not before, wasn't it? I think they
probably already have.
I think they probably already know. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
But at least when they tell the drivers.
I mean, I was chatting to Helmut Marko in Canada, and I said, I'm going to predict what you're going to do. And I said, you're going to put Hadjar in the Red Bull, you're going to bring Lindblad up to the Racing Bull team, and you're going to choose between Lawson and Tsunoda. And he just smiled at me.
They basically just tell us the end of October, so we stop asking.
It would be interesting. I mean, coming back to the point, I was trying to make about having 2 rookies and that kind of thing. I understand the point back there. That was sort of what Toro Rosso became very sort of famed for. You know, you look back at the likes of Buemi and Alguersuari, you had Ricciardo and Jean-Eric Verne, Kvyat. Yes, it's absolutely a school where they train them
Carlos
and send
Sainz.
them up. Carlos Sainz, of course, and sometimes it works out beautifully and sometimes it doesn't. But that's the point of the team.
Alex
but
Albon.
I thought I thought they tried to almost get away from that a little bit when they went to kind of AlphaTauri and they tried to sort of be less of the junior and more of a sister team.
No, that was just marketing for a fashion label.
Well, no, I understand that, but I just think, looking at Arvid Lindblad racing in F2, he's clearly fast, but he's making mistakes, he's crashed, he's had messy weekends. Do you want him to do that in your F1 car next year when you're trying to gather as much data and learn throughout that season as possible?
That's what they're going to do, I believe. So obviously the answer is yes, they do want that. If that happens,
I agree with Harry. It's exactly.
Thanks, Beck.
But it's exactly the reason Cadillac have hired Perez and Bottas, because they want the experience. Okay,
they're a brand new team.
I completely get your point though, Benny, about the fact that the Racing Bulls are an entry team. They are part of the ladder for the most successful drivers to come through and be the next Verstappen, hopefully. But I do think they're missing a trick by having that experience in the car, because they effectively have 4 cars on the grid. If they had 4 experienced drivers, that's all of the feedback. Okay, there are certain rules and regulations that whether or not you can cross the line between the teams, but I would go for experience. I think consistency is very good for a team. I think we've seen it throughout the ages in Formula One. So Lindblad is running 7th as well. It's going to get very expensive very quickly if he takes that big step up into Formula One. He's only 18.
Yeah, no, I agree. He looks like he could do with another year in F2, just like Alex Dunn looks like he could do with another year in F2. Dunn's been the most impressive probably F2 driver this year, when you take into account that he's effectively a rookie. And he's looked very, very quick, and it's a shame, I think, that he split with McLaren. I think that was potentially that probably wasn't the right decision. He got himself into a situation where he's ended up with not the right career path, I would say. Because I would, if I'm a junior racing driver, I'd be rather banking my career on McLaren than I would on the capriciousness of Helmut Marko and Red Bull. Much as I like chatting to Helmut Marko because he's an entertaining guy. But anyway, that ship's gone now for Alex Dunn. He has split with McLaren, or they split with him, however you want to look at it. And but it was the last F2 race weekend. Lindblad rammed into the back of Dunn, didn't he, at approaching Ascari, and took Dunn out and damaged his own race. So, but this is what Red Bull do, and I think just in the context of your point, Harry, about it hasn't been very successful. No, but you've got to remember there's only so many great racing drivers.
Yeah, totally.
You can't have a grid of 20 great F1 drivers. That's not how it works. You have a handful. We're lucky at the moment in Formula One that there's such a good crop of really, really world-class drivers. I'm not sure they're all great, but with Verstappen and Hamilton and Russell and Leclerc and who am I missing out here? I can't look down the screen.
Sainz?
Not Sainz.
No?
Norris, Piastri. There's a really, really high caliber level of drivers. The depth is very, very strong at the top. And that's not even mentioning Fernando Alonso, who's won 2 World Championships, of course. And I had to do that because I knew Beck would smile. It's very rare to have that many good drivers, so you can't expect to keep bringing young drivers through and them all being as good as Max Verstappen, because it's just not going to happen. The data, that's just not how it's weighted. Do
you think you missed your career path, Benny? Do you think you should have been a driver manager or a team manager?
I'd be a lot richer than I am if I had been.
I wouldn't. The thing is with Benny, it's either you're top tier with the gods or bust. He would have no time for Bottas.
Well, I reckon you're as ruthless as Marko.
When I was in Formula 3, when I was covering Formula 3000 a long, long time ago, a guy called Enrico Zanarini was a journalist for Autosprint then, and he was already beginning to dabble in driver management. And Enrico has since then been Giancarlo Fisichella's manager, Eddie Irvine's manager. He was the very first man I saw with one of those, with a sort of wired earpiece for a phone and just talking into midair, and it looked really weird at the time. And of course now everything, obviously the world's moved on quite a lot since then. But yeah, maybe I should have done what Zanarini did, but I didn't. Here I am in the commentary box with you two, and I'm enjoying it very much. Thanks very much.
And aren't we all benefiting from it? One other thing, just on the Alex Dunn stuff. I was led to believe that was a mutual parting of ways, because if you're Alex Dunn, you've got 2 drivers who are fighting for a world championship. They ain't going anywhere anytime soon by the looks of it. Whereas at least with Red Bull, your point, Benny, about, it's brutal, maybe it's the wrong move on that front, but he's got more of a shot of getting into a Formula One car than he has with McLaren in the short term.
And I think that's how it's ended up the way it has, because obviously there's no path into McLaren. There's some stuff I know that I just can't say, I'm afraid, and all I will say is that I would question whether he and his management team have made the right decision in doing in ending up in this scenario. They were cut loose by McLaren, basically.
Okay.
Having the pair of them having not been able to agree on a path forward, they ended his contract. But I think, and I'm sorry to not be able to say it, but I just can't say it. But what I've been told, I don't think he should have ended up in that situation.
Like we've been saying, he needs a couple more years in F2 probably, and also
I think Warner probably do. He's got a lot of talent.
But let's be honest, Norris and Piastri isn't going to stay as friendly as it currently has been. So do you hedge your bets? You stay another year in F2. You wait for Norris and Piastri to end how every single other inter-team battle has ever ended in Formula One. You bide your time, and then you get that seat in the McLaren. Isn't that what you do? Because at the moment, Alex Dunn doesn't actually he's not part of any of the senior teams.
No, but there are other options in Formula One. You know, for example, Alpine have an empty seat for next year at the moment. Maybe he could have found himself there if he'd played his cards differently. Things change in Formula One. So anyway, he didn't, and he is where he is. And I hope, because he looks like trying to be objective about it, but you can't be backing one driver or another. But Alex Dunn looks like a really special talent, potentially. So I hope he finds his way onto a junior program, and it looks like the only option he's got is Red Bull at the moment. And once he's done that and carries on in F2, then he should make his way into F1 if all goes to plan.
In his 2 FP1 outings that he's had, Alex Dunn, should just say Dunn's not in this one, by the way, but we are obviously seeing 9 rookies out there. Currently, the highest of them is Luke Browning, down in 9th for Williams. But Dunn, we saw him in action in Austria. He was only a 10th off Piastri, and we saw him again in Monza. He was about half a second off Norris. Now, yes, it's FP1. You can only take those times for what they are, but let's believe he's suitably impressed.
Norris was waxing lyrical about him. He obviously Norris actually went on to win that weekend in Austria, and he said actually could Dunn do all of my FP1s and set up the car for me because I love the job that he did. But if Alex Dunn's people are listening, I think if he's looking for a new manager, Andrew Benson is available.
Yeah, he takes 25% though, that's the problem. Another thing I just want to touch on, I just think considering we have got 9 rookies out there, and this is not the most representative session that we'll see as the track ramps up massively. Antonelli is currently leading for Mercedes with a 1:20.0, less than a tenth separating him and Hadjar. Ocon, Tsunoda, Hulkenberg the top 5, Piastri, Albon, Colapinto, Alonso, Browning is 10th ahead of Lindblad, Bortoletto 12th ahead of Leclerc, Vesti and Iwasa are the top 15, with Crawford, Hirakawa, Aron, O'Ward and Antonio Fuoco the top 20. One seat that is still up for grabs next year is that Alpine seat that Franco Colapinto currently occupies, as Andrew was mentioning. Flavio Briatore has said that it is between Colapinto and Paul Aron, the Estonian, who is out there at the moment in place of Pierre Gasly. Andrew, I wonder if you heard any more on the grapevine about where that might go. Has Colapinto done enough, or off the back of last week, to defying those team orders? Yes, it was a battle for 18th place, but Flavio Briatore strikes me as a person who might actually look at that and go, fair play, I kind of respect you for ignoring the team orders and overtaking Pierre Gasly and going on to finish 2 places ahead of him.
Well, it sounds like Colapinto's had a bit of a telling off after that incident in Austin. I don't know why they wanted them to, they told him to hold position, didn't they? Was it 16th and 17th places?
Yeah, apparently Gasly was managing fuel.
Yeah, so what's the point? If you're Colapinto, why would you do that? It's just ridiculous. It's just silly to upset your team bosses like that for no reason.
Why not? It was good racing. Why don't you just let them go racing?
It was probably one of the best bits of the race that we saw.
I'm with Briatore, or I'm with Harry's impression of Briatore. I think go for it. These guys, every position for them matters because it all counts back to where you end up in
17th, and he was told to hold station.
But you're only as good as your teammate, and you can only beat your teammate. So at the end of the year, when it comes to the inter-team battles, and it will be recorded as whatever it is at Alpine at the moment, that one goes to Colapinto. And these drivers care.
But does it, according to the team? If Gasly's managing fuel and he's got a problem and they've told him to hold station because it doesn't make any difference to them whether one's 16th and the other's 17th, then how is that beating your teammate?
Just let them go racing. Well, it's not Colapinto's fault that he's managing fuel.
They both, if they had held station, I appreciate we're really talking about 16th, 17th and 18th place here.
I'm sure there's more interesting things we can talk about than this, right?
There will be, but I want to finish the point. Gabriel Bortoleto was right there, and they could have both finished behind a Sauber. And yes, there's no points up for grabs, but surely, you're racing in Formula One, you want to get the most out of what you've got.
Well, every position does count in F1, even if there are points. But in this case, it wasn't for points, and all the teams have points, so it actually wouldn't count unless they end up tied, and it comes down to a count vote for 16th place.
But then if you're, hang on,
never say never.
But then it does matter because you're talking about Sauber and you're talking about Alpine, who have been mostly rubbish this season.
All it takes for Alpine to do a double podium again in Brazil, and suddenly they're right there again.
But the places between the Constructors' Championships, we're talking millions of dollars in prize money. So actually, it does matter if they're going very slowly. Bortoleto's there, then he overtakes them both. Okay, we're talking about 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, whatever.
Did he overtake them?
No, he didn't.
Did he overtake either of them?
Not in the end.
Okay.
But you don't know.
Bortoleto got Gasly.
Oh, he got Gasly, didn't he?
Yeah, he got Gasly. Yeah, Gasly finished behind the Sauber in the end, and Colapinto ahead.
Case closed.
I'm sure Flavio Briatore and Steve Nielsen would have considered that when they were having that conversation, telling us the whole position. Anyway,
this session really is irrelevant, isn't it?
Well, let me do a bit more admin for you then. If you are wondering why we are going into in-depth about rookie moves and battles for 16th, 17th, 18th and 19th from last week, it's because we've got 9 rookies out there in the field. A majority actually of the drivers in the pit lane at the moment, but we have got 9 rookies. McLaren are running Pato O'Ward, their IndyCar driver. Ferrari are running Antonio Fuoco, their simulator driver. Red Bull are running Arvid Lindblad, their Red Bull back driver in F2. Mercedes are running their reserve, Fred Vesti. Aston Martin are running their development driver, Jack Crawford. Alpine have got their reserve, Paul Aron in. Haas have got their reserve, Ryo Hirakawa. Racing Bulls have their reserve, Ayumu Iwasa, with Luke Browning in at Williams. Sauber aren't running anybody, so Bortoleto and Hulkenberg are out there at the moment. That's because the rules mandate this year for all the Formula One teams that they must run a rookie in at least 2 practice sessions. But if you have a rookie driver in your full-time seat, you are automatically ticked off at the start of the year when it comes to Australia. Sauber ran Paul Aron, and that is their FP1 obligations to rookies done, and setting the fastest lap time with 32 minutes and 55 seconds remaining on the clock is Oscar Piastri, a 1:19.035, 9/10 ahead of Isaac Hadjar. Oscar Piastri on that, is he on the soft tyre? No, what's he on at the moment? He's on the hard tyre. I think that the timing screens have gone a bit haywire.
Piastri's done a soft tyre run.
He has done a soft tyre run.
Fastest by nearly a second from Hadjar.
Okay, so early run out then for Piastri while everybody else is still in the pits. No more consequences, Beck, for either McLaren driver, it seems.
No, slate has been wiped clean, as they told us this weekend, which I think is good, because actually Benny and I were talking about this just before we came on air, and I understand the point of there being some sort of repercussion for Norris for crashing into his teammate, although I wouldn't say it was particularly deliberate. There was a suggestion made by Norris that the repercussions, whatever they were, we still don't fully know, would have been for the rest of the season, which felt somewhat harsh. But anyway, Piastri has said yesterday in the press conference that slate has been wiped clean. There will be no further conversations about it. And from what we understand, they are free to go racing. How much meddling will be involved? We'll wait and see this weekend, really. But yes, nothing further, no more punishment. I suspect the one thing that they will be told before they go out on Sunday is, please don't crash into each other.
3 races in a row, not on the podium. Q1 exit here last year for Oscar Piastri. Last 4 races has only led 2 laps. The back end of this season, it feels like it's piling up the pressure for Oscar Piastri, who is sitting pretty at the top, but he's the one being chased.
I think it's really interesting, isn't it, as to why his season has gone off the boil in the way that it has. He dominated in Zandvoort. Okay, Norris was right with him all the way until his engine failed. They were pretty even in Monza. Norris was ahead. That looked like just a normal weekend where the pendulum swings one way and then the other between the two McLaren drivers, as it has all year, although Piastri's still got more wins than Norris overall. Then he had that really out of character weekend in Baku, 3 crashes and a jump start. I don't know what got into him. He just seemed to lose the plot that weekend. Singapore, he qualified ahead of Norris. Now, Jolyon Palmer told us yesterday that Norris would have been ahead had he not made a mistake at the final chicane. But if you're going too fast to try and beat your teammate and you make a mistake, well, then you didn't beat your teammate, did you? So Piastri qualified ahead. No, I mean, it's true, isn't it? But then he didn't finish ahead because of the little contretemps at the first corner. And then he had another bad weekend in Austin, and he was asked specifically after Austin, is it the pressure? And he goes, I don't think it is. This weekend I've just not been quick. He said, if you're not been quick, that's not the pressure getting to you, that's something else. I would say if any weekend looked like pressure was getting to him, it was Baku. But be that as it may, whatever it is that's led to it, he has now had 4 very difficult weekends, and his lead has come down as a consequence. He really needs, for his own for his own sake, in terms of his own self-confidence, I think he really needs to have a good weekend here, because otherwise you would be forgiven for thinking that the sort of the yips might start to get to him if he doesn't.
Yeah, and the last 4 races, as you say, have been bad for him, because we know, you mentioned about Verstappen, has just a brilliant run of the last 5 races. Norris has finished ahead of Piastri in the last 4 races as well. And I don't think Norris has had a particularly outstanding 4 races either. He's just making fewer mistakes. I think the pressure is starting to show on both McLaren drivers, actually. Harry, you touched on it at the start. Verstappen, he's got the experience. He's the 4-time world champion. I think we're starting to see a little bit with Norris. He had a bit of a title fight last year, not really, but you could see the pressure was there. He's got a bit of experience, and he'll take any experience over nothing. And I think with Norris, we're starting to see actually that familiar feeling, but this time round he knows what to do with it. Piastri, he's so young, he's only 24 years old. I mean, Norris is only 25, but it's a whole brand new experience for him. They've already won the Constructors. He is leading the way. He was asked if he wanted to be hunted or the hunter. He said he'd rather be the one being hunted down, and absolutely you want track position, don't you? As you always do, you want to be the one leading the championship, because then everything is within your control. It just doesn't feel like he's in control at the moment.
But that's the thing, though, he may well say that, but when it comes to turn 1, particularly here in Mexico, and especially after the US sprint, we see collisions on lap 1 in turn 1 at Mexico City more often than we don't. And will that start to just play in Piastri's mind, where normally he would get an elbow out? This time he's a bit reserved, and that might cost him 2 or 3 places.
Well, they've lost their ability to crash and have it have no consequences, haven't they? Because they've crashed, basically, in Austin and in Baku in Piastri's case. So, yeah, and this is what Formula 1's about. You know, it's an intense environment, and there's no hiding. And they've now got Verstappen breathing down their necks. They're still in total control of the championship. Andrea Stella, the team principal, was making that point very clearly after Austin. It's in our hands, he was saying, as long as we do our job, we're fine. But the problem is they haven't been doing their job that well in the last 4 races. And it's easy to say, well, as long as we do our job, we'll be fine. But if you're not doing, then you need to find a way to start doing again. And, it's interesting, they turned off their development taps. One of the questions I got asked in the Q&A on the BBC Sport website earlier this week was why. Well, they made a big step forward with their car from last year into this year, with lots of innovation, particularly around the suspension, which led to some aerodynamic innovation as well. And they were finding diminishing returns with this car, and of course with 2026 coming down the road, you can't afford to sacrifice next year's car, especially when you've got an advantage like they had for most of this season, because when regulations change, if a team ends up on the back foot and gets it wrong, then it can take a long time to recover. And conversely, if you get it right, then you can dominate for a while, as we saw with Red Bull at the start of these current regulations. So they're trying to make sure that doesn't happen, balancing those two situations and their potential consequences. Whereas Red Bull, it's interesting, isn't it, that they've carried on developing, and Laurent Mekies, the team principal, said that they're doing that because he felt that they needed to understand this car and the tools that they've used to develop this car, to have the confidence that they can then develop with those tools the next generation of cars, which also makes sense. and it's really paying off for them at the moment. And thankfully for all of us, it's made a really, really interesting end to the season. Not that I don't think it would have been interesting anyway, just between Norris and Piastri, but when you throw Verstappen into the mix, it's delicious, really, Beck, isn't it?
And then to add to all of that, we've arrived in Mexico City, which is about as much of a Max Verstappen track as you could possibly get. So it's all well and good McLaren coming out and saying we just need to do our job, but you are 2,500 odd meters up, altitude playing its part. Verstappen has won here 5 times. He absolutely knows how to get his elbows out here. And it's just, it already feels like coming into this weekend, it's not going to be the weekend that McLaren won. And so, you know, we're already talking about the pressure, Harry, about how it's going to get to Piastri being the one in the lead. He's only 14 points ahead of his teammate. And then,
sorry, Beck, Arvid Lindblad was on a quick lap, and coming through the right-hander of turn 12, there is a curve that awaits you, and went out a little bit too wide and pitched the car up, and it rode along the curb and really scraping the underside of that Red Bull, and stopped him turning in, actually, and then came clattering back down to rejoin the track. So that rather scuppered Arvid Lindblad's lap, which had looked a little tidy up until then.
One of the reasons that Verstappen has such a good record at Mexico City is because he had an engine advantage for a while. The Honda engine dealt better with the high altitude and the thinner air in Mexico City than the Mercedes engine did for a period of time when Mercedes were otherwise dominant, and therefore that made Red Bull more competitive here in Mexico City compared to Mercedes. But of course he has also won since that stopped being the case. Mercedes fixed that problem. It's interesting that last year Ferrari were dominant in Mexico City, but of course that was a very different Ferrari. They were really coming on strong at the end of last year, challenging McLaren for the Constructors' Championship, which they just lost out on. It's amazing to think back now, isn't it, to a year ago, to think Ferrari was so competitive and how much they dropped the ball over the winter going into this season.
But Charles Leclerc on the podium last time out, Lewis Hamilton up in 4th. Okay, you know, in the end, just over 10 seconds back from his teammate after his pit stop. But it looked like a better weekend overall for Ferrari, and we see it now and then Mercedes as well, George Russell winning twice. While I don't think they're fighting for outright wins throughout the rest of the season, they can play a part in this title. They could take some big points.
They are going to be a problem, yeah. I think Ferrari, it was a good weekend for them in Austin. And I just think George Russell has been utterly brilliant this season. They will play their part within this fight. They have the ability to get onto the podium. I agree with you. I don't think necessarily they're going to be ones fighting for the wins. I think the problem McLaren have now is Verstappen has proven that he can win at any kind of track. It doesn't really matter. The circuits all kind of suit him at the moment, particularly because he's just, as Helmut Marko said, he's so up for it now and reinvigorated and looking for his 5th. But I absolutely think they could cause problems for them. Ferrari haven't actually won since Mexico last year. That was their last victory with Carlos Sainz, and they couldn't look any further, even after Austin, even after what was a fairly okay result, for Ferrari standards. Actually wasn't great, let's be honest. But they look quite off the pace. I just can't see them on the top step, but I can definitely see them causing problems.
I think Ferrari's weekend in Austin looked better than it actually was, just because of circumstances. Leclerc qualified 3rd, and then they got the strategy right, the soft and the medium tyres, starting on the softs and going to the mediums. Everybody thought it was going to be a one-stop race on the medium and the hard. The soft tyres catapulted Leclerc ahead of Norris at the start, and he basically spent the entire race, Norris, trying to get past Leclerc. And I think had he not been passed by Leclerc at the start, he would have gone with Verstappen. They would have had their own battle, and Leclerc would have been left a long way behind by the end of the race. But he drove brilliantly, and I think you're talking about George Russell's season, Beck. I think Charles Leclerc has also had an absolutely outstanding season this year, and it's gone a little bit unnoticed because Ferrari have had such a difficult year and not been competitive. But you look at his record against Hamilton, and Hamilton just a week ago, Hamilton's definitely got better, it has to be said, in the second part of the season. But just a week ago in Austin, Hamilton was right with Leclerc and Norris when Leclerc stopped, but he lost 13 seconds in the second part of the race. And it just goes to show that Leclerc, he's even become, he's got this reputation of being this incredible qualifier, but he's also become a bit of a tyre whisperer. So I think him and Russell, they're the sort of unsung heroes of this season for me. Of course, you can't put past Verstappen potentially as a driver of the season if you're going to pick one so far. But let's see how the season ends. There's still 5 races to go. We might change our minds again.
Plus 2 sprints as well after Mexico. Obviously in back-to-back right now. Being in Austin last week. We'll then have a week off before we head to Sao Paulo for the next sprint race. Then it's a return to Las Vegas, where Mercedes could be quite strong there with George Russell in particular. Then it's a hop over to Qatar for the final sprint of the year before everything culminates in Abu Dhabi, and what we hope will be an absolutely fantastic season finale where the championship will be decided, but we've still got a little way left to get there. 20 minutes and 17 seconds remain of free practice one. Charles Leclerc, speak of, in that Ferrari is fastest, a 1:18.380 on that soft tyre. Antonelli's Mercedes is second. Then comes Hulkenberg, who's just being wheeled back into his Sauber garage. Piastri and Tsunoda are the top 5. They're on outlaps at the moment. Piastri back out there on the hard tyre. Ocon is 6th ahead of Albon, Hadjar, Alonso and Franco Colapinto rounds out the top 10. Then it's Vesti in the Mercedes 11th, Hirakawa in the Haas 12th, and Iwasa in the Racing Bulls 13th, followed by 3 more rookies. Browning in at Williams is 14th, Aron is 15th, with Crawford in 16th for Aston Martin. Bortoletto, Lindblad, O'Ward and Fuoco the top 20, and we have a yellow flag out, and it is for the Racing Bulls of Isaac Hadjar, who has managed to find reverse. Is that down at turn number 12 possibly? Isaac Hadjar has found a big bit of runoff there and managed to reverse it. No damage by the looks of things to any of the bodywork. It was at turn 12 as he now makes his way into the stadium, the former baseball stadium. 25,000 that adds to the capacity of this Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez circuit. We're at high altitude here, over 2,200 meters above sea level. That is apparently 3 times the height of the Burj Khalifa. I couldn't believe that when I read that stat. Almost 3 times the height, 2.5 maybe.
I mean, if you've ever run the track in Mexico City, I can believe it.
I can't say I have, Rebecca.
I can't breathe by the end of it. It's I'm not very good at altitude training, but the altitude is definitely an issue. And the drivers obviously come from Austin, fly up to Mexico City. They have to do a bit of altitude training themselves, get used to it. It is hard work though.
No heat hazard for this weekend though, so no having to deal with the cooling vests that come with that one. We'll have a week off from that. There a bit of tyre talk, because we always love that chat. Pirelli have brought the C2, that's the hard, and we've got another jump in compound. So if you were with us last week, we had a jump again, and we're following that up. So we've got the C2 hard, then we go to the C4 medium, the C5 soft. So the jumping compounds between the medium and the soft is as last year. Pirelli said that hard is supposed to be very conservative, give less grip, and that's again, Beck, to encourage more than one stop. So I'm presuming that means we're just going to get a one-stop race.
I was about to say, it was so successful in Austin, wasn't it? Worked absolutely like a charm. Yes, it's not really working. I just think Pirelli needs to develop better tyres.
I just think if you go back to that period, 2011, 2016, where we saw really steep drop-offs in the tyre life during a race, and the drivers of course complained about it. Durability's not good enough. Pirelli went away, revised things, and now I can't actually remember the last time we had a 2-stop race properly, the one that wasn't mandated. I'd very happily see that kind of tyre introduced again, when we have a steep drop-off where suddenly you've got grip and then it just falls away from you.
Yeah, we want some cliff diving. Benny's talking about Leclerc being the tyre whisperer. No, we don't want any of that. No, thank you. I mean, Lewis Hamilton's also a tyre whisperer, so I don't fully agree with you. I think just Hamilton thought he's not going to fight his teammate, and he just ended up sitting back and having a bit of a lonely race. But I honestly, it bores me to tears talking about tyres. Sorry.
Well, with 60 minutes and 40 seconds left, Rebecca.
But it shouldn't be like that, because actually, once upon a time, they were quite a fun part of racing, and actually, they are the only part of the car that touches the track, more or less.
Because also, one-stop races are no good, in my opinion. They're not interesting. They're just not.
And there's lots of artificial stuff happening at the moment to try and promote more stops. So we have this jumping compounds. We have the increasing the speed of the pit lanes so that they don't lose so much time.
It's all just a bit of nothing.
But it's all a bit of nothing, exactly. And so actually, we're just tinkering around the edges, hoping we can somehow improve the racing. I mean, let's be honest, DRS is artificial as well, but they had to do something. These cars are so wide now, it's so hard to overtake. If you ever listen to Lewis Hamilton talk about racing, and he went through a phase, you can correct me, Benny, but it was like 2018-19, where all he ever talked about was the delta time needed to do overtaking, and in the end he himself just got bored of talking about it, because it's so difficult to overtake unless you have some sort of artificial help like DRS. I'm sure there is a stat somewhere that tells us the number of overtakes in the last 5 years with DRS versus without it. If you know it, hashtag BBC F1, let us know. But yeah, this is one thing that gets me about F1. It's all a bit of a tinkering, and I know Benny's desperate to come in because he so vigorously hit his button to turn his mic on.
So I think you're misinterpreting the tyre situation. What happened before, at the beginning of the Pirelli era, was you had tyres that were very thermally sensitive, and the drivers had to lap 2 or 3 seconds off the limit to make them last a stint length. Now, it did mean sometimes that you got mad 3-4 stop races. Barcelona 2013, for example, was, I think, Alonso won with a 4-stop strategy. But very quickly it devolved into 1-stop races quite quickly, even with the drivers managing their tyres. So, and that was going on until quite recently. What's happened in the last couple of years, for whatever reason, Pirelli have developed a tyre that the drivers can now push much closer to the limit on during races. Now, they're still only doing 1-stop races, but they're doing 1-stop races before when they were managing the tyres 2 or 3 seconds off the pace, and they're doing 1-stop races now when they're pushing closer to the limit than the absolute limit of the car. Now, I don't know about you, but I think Formula One is about testing man and machine to the absolute limit, and I would much rather have a 1-stop race where drivers are pushing hard or much closer to the limit than they were before than a 1-stop race where they're tootling around 3 seconds off the pace to stop the tyres overheating.
Qatar 2023?
Exactly. That was a race where they pushed flat out to the limit. Yeah. But Silverstone is often a track where
because of mandatory pit stops.
Yes, that was. Yes, but there was a different situation going on there because there was a tyre safety issue there. But Silverstone is actually a race track where I don't know what it is, some kind of alchemy to do with the track surface and the fact that the corner mix is very even between left and right. You quite often get a race there, even when the tyres were overheating generally, where they didn't tend to overheat so much, and then you would get these races where the drivers were pushing close to the limit. Now, the drivers are starting to say they're agreeing with you two and saying, oh, maybe it's not so good that the tyres are much better now, because although it's better for us to drive harder, it's maybe not so entertaining. And they were complaining about the lack of overtaking in Austin, for example. But I would say that there was lack of overtaking anyway. It's always been hard to overtake in Formula One. I'm not sure that's really got any different with these tyres that are now that they're able to push on. So that would be my position on it. But I just don't like to see drivers.
No, I take your point.
Messing around 3 seconds off the pace when they can drive faster, but the tyres won't let them.
Okay, I agree. So flip it. It's not the tyres. It's almost every generation of car ends up not being able to follow in dirty air, to avoid overtaking.
Aerodynamics. You know, if you need aerodynamics to make the car go faster around the corners, and you want the Formula 1 cars to be the fastest cars in the world, and so therefore you do need aerodynamics, you're going to find it hard to overtake because you're going to find it hard to follow. That's just the function of it. If you want to take the aerodynamics away, fine, but then the cars will go a lot slower.
But they make them lighter.
Well, yes, but a lot of this is another misunderstanding. A lot of the reason the cars are heavy now is because of all the safety things. Like the Halo itself, 25 kilos, is right there. A lot of the side impact things. Of course, the hybrid engines make them a bit heavier, but not so much that it's just the engine's fault. It's to do with safety. The cars have got bigger, but they've got bigger because if they're longer, then you can get more downforce, and more downforce makes them go faster.
The drivers want it lighter, by the way.
No, I agree, but I'm not saying they should. I'm not saying it wouldn't be better if they were light. I'm just saying it's really hard to make them lighter.
Benny, do you want us to take you for a taco?
We've got 11 minutes and 53, 52, 51 seconds remaining. Just seen Antonio Fuoco, the Ferrari sim driver, in the car for Lewis Hamilton, who just had a bit of a hairy moment coming through the stadium. He's currently down in 19th. The other Ferrari, Charles Leclerc, still tops the session, a 1:18.3, a tenth ahead of Antonelli, Hülkenberg, Piastri and Ocon, the top five, and they're already getting ready for George Russell to get back in the car down at Mercedes. Fred Vesti's occupying that part of the garage at the moment, but with just over 10 minutes left, they've ripped up the Vesti name that is being put onto the floor of the Mercedes garage, and they're already putting George back in place.
Because they can spend the break going to get tacos.
So just one final point on the weight question. So this was another fallacy that was brought up by the FIA president when he was trying to push the idea of V10 engines earlier this year. He's saying if we have V10s, then we can take all the weight of the turbo and the battery out, and the cars will be much lighter. Well, no, they won't, because you're going to need double the amount of fuel when you start the race. So you got an extra 100 kilos of fuel in them, and there's all your weight. There's more than the weight that you've taken out of the car to put a natural aspirated engine in it. So you've got to look at these things in the round when you discuss questions about Formula One, and too many people, and he's a good case in point, aren't looking at it properly.
Well, if you have any thoughts on that, we'd love to hear them. Hashtag BBC F1, or you could email f1@bbc.co.uk. 9 rookies in this session, and I think they're all occupying the last 9 positions on the timing board. Vesti 13th, then O'Ward, Aron, Hirakawa, Iwasa, Browning, Crawford and Fuoco. So a mixture of drivers there, some getting their free practice debuts, some returning for another FP1 session, others dipping a toe in, working as simulator drivers or development drivers for those teams. Just outside of the top 10 at the moment is Isaac Hadjar in 11th. Saw him run wide a few moments ago. He's back on, we went back onto the track and is now in the pit lane along with Fernando Alonso. But it is the Ferrari who currently tops the session, but this is free practice 1, so it is early days in this session with temperatures starting to rise, the sun shining over this Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez as we head to the second race in a row in North America. We've travelled about 750 miles south as the crow flies from the circuit of the Americas to this high altitude track with its high speed straights, tight and technical final sector, which runs brilliantly through that stadium section, the Forosol, where you twist left, then right, then left again through turns 13, 14 and 15, being overlooked by a crowd of 25,000. No Sergio Perez here this weekend. I think, and I might be corrected, but I think this is the first time since the Mexico Grand Prix came back onto the calendar that it is the first weekend or the first race on Sunday where we will have no Mexican driver. We've had Sergio Perez, of course, the majority. I think Esteban Gutierrez got one race when he was with Haas, and ever since then it's just been Perez flying the flag. But we have got a Mexican out there in the McLaren. He's actually just crossed the line and improved his lap time. Pato O'Ward is in place of Lando Norris, down in 13th at the moment, 1.3 seconds off the pace, but I'm sure Lando Norris will be desperate to get back into that car for FP2 and recharge and get back on for this title fight that we're expecting to see go all the way to the bitter end.
I tell you what, with Perez, he earned his salary through merchandise in Mexico. So the Forosol is right at one end of the paddock. You come in one end, you go all the way through it, and then it's at the other end. And it's one of those places that you don't always leave the paddock when you go to these tracks, because often there's not much going on, but Mexico City is certainly one of those. And so you walk around the Forosol, you go behind it, there's all the food stands and drink and everything that you can imagine, and I would say about, 90% of the fans were all wearing Perez merchandise, and it was absolutely incredible the amount of support he had. And the track is pretty central, so a lot of people complain about the traffic, mostly because they stay in the kind of upper end, the Mayfair version equivalent. It's called Blanco in Mexico City. I don't stay there.
Are you sure about that? You know a lot about it.
Yeah, because that's where they have all their team dinners and stuff. But I stay more down in towards the Old Town, and that's about 20 minutes from the track, so it's really, really central. But the point is, when you're in town, you can definitely tell that the race is on. Just Perez's face was plastered absolutely everywhere. Not so much the case this year, but the support for him was absolutely amazing.
Well, it will be huge again, the return of Perez, this time next year, racing for Cadillac, and the American team that are coming into the sport as team number 11 on the grid. Well, we're all expecting them to be pretty much at the back, but it really is going to be, we're going to see, I think, a lot bigger disparity between teams, aren't we, regardless of where they are, because right now we're kind of enjoying an incredibly tightly competitive field that looks like it's going to go out the window for next year.
We're only expecting them to be at the back because that's what they've told us. And
they're doing a great job of underplaying it.
They've done and to be fair, I think it's probably the right PR approach for them. You know, you undersell and you can only then over-deliver. So I think it's a sensible approach for them. A lot of the chatter has been about Mercedes. We know that they were the ones who absolutely nailed the engine change at 2014, had that very dominant period. They tend to get the regulation changes correct. A lot of the personnel who were there at that time aren't necessarily there anymore. Andy Cowell, who headed up that engine program at Mercedes, is obviously now over at Aston Martin. It'll be fascinating to see the pecking order. It's why, as we were discussing earlier, so many teams, McLaren included, had to make that decision of when you switch over. A lot of the back teams, like Alpine, haven't improved at all this season because they basically walked in this year and went, whatever, we're just going to start looking at 2026. We'll write it off for a couple of million quid in the prize money. Okay, we might get lucky, we might finish 9th instead of 10th, but actually, ultimately, for us, it's all about 2026. It's why there's been so much chatter about possibly Christian Horner going there. Good mates, obviously, with Flavio Briatore. Enstone's down the road from his house. I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think Horner or Horner's people have been phoning up everyone. It's just, looking ahead, we don't know the pecking order. I wouldn't be surprised to see Mercedes up there, Ferrari up there. They started quite early on the 26 car as well. McLaren are going to be so interesting because they switched quite early. And then Red Bull. And I think what Laurent Mekies has been doing at Red Bull is absolutely brilliant. Not just in terms of how he's kind of changed their approach to race weekends. There has been a bit of boost in the morale within the factory from what I hear, as is often, the new manager boost as it is. But also just testing out the apparatus almost that they have, the equipment that they have, to say what's happening in the sim, is that what's happening on the track? Because that's often where teams get it wrong.
So one of the things about next year that makes it so complicated in terms of trying to work out where people might be is that you've not just got the engine, you've got the performance of the internal combustion part of the engine. Then you've got about 50% of the total power output is provided by the electrical systems now, or will be the next year. And there's going to be fully sustainable fuel that everybody's using and having to create, because obviously you don't just pull it out of the ground and refine it. Obviously, I'm oversimplifying what happens with petrol, but anyway. We've got another.
Piastri just had a moment
through the S's.
Yeah, turn 7 just ran wide. Rear slipped out from him, but he rejoins the track.
He's still 4th quickest, which about 4/10 behind Leclerc, who's setting the pace in the Ferrari. I think they're all onto their race simulation runs now. Anyway, so numbers are beginning to sort of leak out about the performance of the internal combustion sides of the engines, and so people are hearing that the Mercedes has got a little bit more power at the moment than the Red Bull engine, for example, and that was one of the things that Max Verstappen was considering earlier this year when he was thinking about whether to jump ship from Red Bull to go to Mercedes for 2026. But, of course, no one's going to know at this stage how well teams are operating within the complexities of the deployment, and that's going to be really difficult because basically the cars, certainly at some tracks, are going to struggle to recover enough energy to do a lap with full performance. And then, on top of that, people aren't going to know how well the different fuels are performing. There's even rumours about that, about such and such a fuel is doing better than such and such another fuel. It's going to make it really hard to work out next year when we see, if say, for example, a Mercedes is a second quicker than a Ferrari. How much of that is the car? How much of that is the performance of the internal combustion engine? How much of it is the hybrid deployment strategies that they're employing? And how much is the fuel? Shell versus Petronas in that case, with Ferrari on Shell and Petronas on Mercedes. We're just not going to know. And again, it's going to take a little while for all that sort of stuff to leak out. But that's why it's so hard right now to understand where everyone's going to be. What we can say about McLaren is they'll get the Mercedes engine off Mercedes, and they talk about how their partnership is pretty good as a customer team, and so they'll be dependent on how the Mercedes engine performs, but there's no reason why McLaren as a team can't produce a competitive car under next year's regulations if they can do it under this year's regulations, you would think. So anyway, but whereas Cadillac, for example, they're having to build everything up from scratch, and there's every reason to believe that they're going to struggle, not least just because of the way their team is organised at the moment. We had a tour of the Cadillac facility at Silverstone early this year in the summer, around about the time of the British Grand Prix. They've got 7 different buildings on the Silverstone Innovation Park, or whatever it's called, next door to where the Aston Martin integrated state-of-the-art factory is, and a facility in Fisher, Indiana, which is being built and should be ready sometime next year. And they're having to buy an engine from Ferrari. It's no wonder they think they're going to struggle. As Graham Loudon, the team principal there, says, why wouldn't we? If I was a team principal of one of the other teams and we came in and beat them, I'd be asking what on earth's gone on.
It certainly is a huge task for the likes of Cadillac, and even the Sauber team, who will become the Audi Works team, and they will be making their own engine. That's a whole nother thing as well. New chassis and engine for that team when they come in. I'm quite excited. Are you excited, Beck?
Absolutely, yeah.
I know it could mean suddenly you have one team ahead, but I think because there's just so many unknowns. Yeah,
it's one of those situations. There's a lot of chatter, isn't there, when we get to a new regulation change about how can we not, please? Can we postpone it? Can we leave it? We like the racing as it is at the moment, although absolutely no one was saying that at the start of the year when McLaren were dominant. So yeah, I think it's really exciting because, as we were saying, it's not just about the engines either. The whole, the aerodynamics, the chassis, there's new regulations around that as well. The driver situation, that is going to unfold through next year as well. And I just think it's good sometimes to have a reset. I actually don't think there's anything wrong with that. And actually, a lot of the teams that are coming in now that we're seeing are coming into the sport because of what they're doing. These sustainable fuels, the engines, they're incredibly efficient, these engines. And the likes of Cadillac, the likes of Audi, Mercedes, Ferrari, they all want to be in this sport because they do actually put a lot of this technology back into their road cars. It's actually that this is their shop window. For Ferrari, they don't market at all. Everything they do, this is completely their shop front, and they sell everything off the back of this pretty much. Oof.
I was actually just grimacing because Arvid Lindblad is a tenth faster than Yuki Tsunoda at the checkered flag, which won't be good news for Yuki Tsunoda, even though it is only a free practice one session. That's a really good effort from Lindblad in his Red Bull outing here.
When you were talking earlier about the 9 rookies filling the final 9 places, I was thinking, wouldn't you be pleased, wouldn't you? You wouldn't want to be beaten by one of them. But actually, Lindblad's beaten quite a few of them, 6th.
Yeah, that's he's the only rookie up there. The rest are all at the bottom end of the timing screen as we get the checkered flag out of FP1. Counts down to 0, and it's Ferrari that takes first blood. Charles Leclerc fastest with a 1:18.3, a 10th clear of the Mercedes of Kimi Antonelli. Good FP1 for the 2 Sauber drivers. Nico Hülkenberg 3rd. He was quick in Austin as well. Scored points, his first since his podium in Silverstone. And could have scored some big points in the sprint, but we all know how that one ended up. Piastri 4th, Bortoleto, who had actually a complete opposite weekend to his teammate Hülkenberg last time out. So far, just a couple of tenths adrift of his teammate in 5th. Arvid Lindblad, rookie of the session, goes 6th ahead of Esteban Ocon. Tsunoda down in 8th ahead of Colapinto and Albon the top 10, with Isaac Hadjar in 11th and Fernando Alonso the top 12. Then come your rookies, and waving to the Mexican crowd is the Mexican IndyCar driver Pato O'Ward, who finished 13th, 1.3 seconds off the pace. Fred Vesti in for George Russell at Mercedes was 14th. Paul Aron in for Pierre Gasly at Alpine was 15th. Ryo Hirakawa in for Ollie Behrman was 16th for Haas. Ayumu Iwasa, who was in for Liam Lawson down at Racing Bulls, was 17th ahead of Luke Brown in for Carlos Sainz at Williams. Jack Crawford was in for Lance Stroll, 19th and 20th. And last, Ferrari bookmarking the top 20. Antonio Fuoco, their simulator driver, 20th and at the bottom of the field. But an all fairly clean session as they line back up on the grid for some practice starts. We'll do this all over again, but we'll say goodbye to the rookies and we'll welcome back the full-timers for free practice 2. We'll be on Sports Extra for that one. You can join us at 5 to 11 this evening. But thanks to the whole team. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Beck. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.